Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Zoning Review Committee meeting of September 12th, 2023. This meeting is being conducted remotely online through the Zoom meeting app, and public participation is encouraged through the app or by phone. This is in accordance with the extension of COVID pandemic provisions allowing remote public meetings by the General Court through March 31st, 2025, per Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. So first up, we have a review of the early draft of zoning language for the MBTA Communities District. And with that, I will turn this over to you, Eric, and also to Mike.
Sure. I'll give you a little brief intro here, Mike. Mike Asciola is one of our representatives from NIMCOG, the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. That's working with the committee, obviously, for MBTA Communities compliance. And they've provided us with discussion items previously on boundary districts or district boundaries for different areas of town. And while we can review some of those, I think generally speaking, the committee's done a good job so far of voicing its opinions and preferences on the combinations of those. And as we move forward towards preparations for what we can either submit to the state for pre-approval and or ultimately to town meeting in the spring for approval, we need to start working on some of the language that go into the zoning bylaws itself to help support the district itself. Like what's feasible, what's possible, are there specific regulations and other things that the zoning review committee would like to have incorporated. NIMCOG has utilized essentially the state's prepared model bylaw as an initial guideline. Not all of the elements within the suggested or within the model bylaw are applicable to Tyngsborough, and there's probably elements that we're going to want to tweak and provide commentary on. Mike will walk us through that a bit with regards to comparing the use of something that the state's already provided as a starting point versus starting from scratch. I think utilizing the state's model is a good strategy. Not only if we inform the state that that's where we started, it probably gets them a little bit further along with regards to the review of the language that the town uses. And I'm hoping that it gets us a little bit further along quicker, since even though it feels Springtown meeting feels a long way away, especially since we've got Fall Town meeting to get through first next month, it'll be here before we know it. So with that, Mike, I did make sure that you could share your screen, and there is a Google Doc that I'm using with them to collaborate. And we can put that up on screen to discuss, I guess, the elements of it this evening. Mike, one of the things that I thought might be good as you're walking us through that, essentially trying to break it down into sections and components. And I don't think that the model bylaw really incorporated a lot of either design elements or ways for communities to sort of put their, I don't want to say fingerprints, but maybe influence some of the structure characteristics that might get developed in these districts. Because while you can allow multifamily by right, and you can't specifically prohibit it or put up obstacles, you can influence characteristics of the buildings. How many units per building, where are the entry points and things like that, that could potentially incorporate some of the characteristics that the residents in Tyngsborough find important. There you go.
Right. Actually, Eric, would you be able to share your screen? I have kind of a weird setup. I have my one monitor with
Sure.
That's actually connected to my NIMCOG computer, and that's what I'm reading off of. And then I have my laptop for the Zoom.
Do you want me to pull up the Google Doc link that you sent me where we're collaborating from, or the snapshot? Because I sent
either way, they both pretty much say the same.
Okay. If the snapshot's good enough, I can probably pull it up faster.
Yeah, I would probably just put the all markup on for review, just so you can see the comments in line.
All right, if that doesn't come up, then I'll make sure I open it in the browser. So
when I use Zoom on my remote desktop, it ends up showing the camera into my office. So rather than looking at an empty chair at my work office, I have to kind of configure it this way.
Hang on just a second. So. All right, does that help?
Perfect. Great. Let's see. Yeah. So the sample zoning basically it follows kind of a standard standard zoning ordinance with or bylaw with the purpose first, which are directly from the section 3A of the Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, goes through kind of what why we're doing this, what our intent is, and kind of as guidelines for decisions and the ordinance in general. The establishment and applicability section kind of goes over, gives an kind of an overview as to where the zoning overlay is and how many acres, and what zoning districts it might be superimposed over. And then it has basically the standard definitions. This section we would merge into the front of your zoning bylaw definitions to kind of keep it consistent. We may have to look to see if there are any conflicting definitions and make sure that it's used all the way through the bylaw in the same light. As Eric was talking about too, development standards, that's kind of where we're probably going to have the most leeway as far as changes, and that's going to be how we shape the development that we intend to be permitting in these districts. If you can scroll down, again, permitted use, all the multifamily use has to be permitted by right. Where we have kind of some jurisdiction over, it would be in the site plan review and the standards that we adopt for the development itself. And we go through dimensional standards. Most of these standards are going to be kind of derived from the the scenario report and the compliance model and GIS modeling that was done to show the capacity of the district and size, and all the factors that kind of went into creating that the scenarios.
Mike, do you want to go through the whole document first, or do you want to briefly cover some of the more recent commentary that the state's provided with regards to mixed use and what's available on the ground floor and things like that?
Sure.
Something that the zoning review committee might not have been updated on. Even I don't feel like I've been fully briefed on the state's adapted or revised guidance with regards to requirements for mixed use and whether or not it's applicable to Tyngsborough.
Yeah, so you can have mixed use within your multifamily 3A zoning district. It doesn't necessarily have to be mandatory. However, the state last month provided some guidance and standards as far as if you wanted to make it a mandatory on the ground floor to have a commercial use. It really is more for the communities that are more urban, where you have for like a Cambridge or Arlington, areas that they're more built up, and where if there was no commercial use on the ground floor, it might create kind of a void as far as walkability and not having any pedestrian amenities on the ground floors. So the state allowed up to 25% of your capacity to be put into this mandatory mixed use zone. However, it does, well, it might count for the towards your capacity. It doesn't allow for, it doesn't count towards the acreage, the 50 acres that you're allowed. And with Tyngsborough, you're at kind of the bottom end where the mandatory minimum 15 units per acre. If you multiply that by the minimum 50 acres, you get 750 units, which is the right at the capacity. So any additional mandatory mixed use that you would be implementing, which you need that kind of urban walkable village center to really implement that zoning, which I don't see that in any of the areas that we were looking at in Tyngsborough. So through our conversations, Eric and I kind of thought that it really wasn't applicable to Tyngsborough to do a mandatory mixed use. However, it doesn't preclude mixed use from being done in the districts as long as it's a permitted use in the base district. If that makes sense.
Do you have to have a minimum mixed use?
You don't. Well, so the mandatory, are you talking about the mandatory mixed use or just the normal multifamily zoning district that we're proposing?
The mixed use portion. Do you have to allow for it, or does it have to have a certain threshold?
You don't have to. It's up to the community.
Okay, so my experience is I would vote, especially in our town, not to have it if we can. I've seen it not be a productive use, and there's always battles between a commercial, say, restaurant user and multifamily above. So if it's not, I don't know if we can prohibit it, but I would not encourage it in our town.
Yeah, the only if a commercial use is allowed in the base district, it would kind of there is a potential for a mixed use. So if you wanted to eliminate that potential, I guess, conflict, you'd have to change the zoning of the underlying district or choose another district to do the multifamily under section 3A.
I'm not trying to overcomplicate it. If it could be discouraged through the drafting of the bylaw, then that's.
Yeah,
I mean, if we look at it from the way that we did our overlay district for the mixed use portion already, we already saw that it didn't work necessarily for Tyngsborough, but if it works for a developer, more power to them. If it did work on the ground floor, but I think that's what we discovered was, we tried to write the bylaw where it would have commercial on the ground floor, but it just didn't work for Tyngsborough.
Yeah. And there are a couple of sites that were selected that kind of on the northern Middlesex road, where it could be behind potential commercial development or beside it. So there are the areas that were selected that are they have a base zone that's industrial, could be, probably unlikely to be both unless required or permitted, but you'd still have the authority if it was a special use permit for the commercial. You'd still have that authority under it, where if you did the mandatory mixed use under the section 3A zoning, the mixed use portion would be permitted by right as well. That's kind of another caveat of that mandatory mixed use.
Right, it sounds like mandatory mixed use for the ground floor is not applicable to Tyngsborough because of the constraints that the state put on their guidelines. Essentially, there's got to be pre-existing conditions on the ground, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Let's
So do
see.
we want to strike that altogether and just not allow it? Is that sort of what we're talking about here?
Well, I
Well, it's really not proposed here as a mixed use. Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah, we could strike the commercial portion there, or yeah, that we might want to discuss that a little bit more in depth, later on, as to the, how the design's gonna go.
Mike-
What
Well, go ahead.
Joe, do you want to say
Mike,
something?
I have a question. So a mixed use on the first floor does in no way take away from the necessity of the housing units. For instance, just because you have a mixed use on the first floor doesn't negate the fact that you're losing housing space. You have to make it up somewhere else.
No, so you're zoning for the capacity.
Yeah.
And with an overlay zone, if there is a commercial component that goes in, the density still is at a minimum 15 units per acre.
Mhm. So
So
you're adding development space on the first floor, but you're not getting a credit for that against your housing requirement. So in other words, you have to raise it up a floor to get the same number of units per square.
Well, technically you could do that, but if there's a limit, if it's 3, if you're limiting your building to 3 stories and there are some other development because you're zoning for capacity, not so much units built. So if there is another use that goes in that takes away from the potential residential development, you don't get penalized for that. You just have less units that are possibly built out of the
No, so
out
you
of the
don't
district.
get penalized for it. In other words, we don't have to expand our 50 acres to 55 or something like that.
No.
Okay, I got you.
Correct.
I got it.
It's just
Okay,
that
so we're not
the
penalized.
maximum possible that could be built there is what we're zoning for.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yeah.
we still have to come up with the 15 per acre, whether it's got retail or not, or commercial or not, right?
Correct.
So
The
I
zone
guess
needs to be-
if we're trying to maximize our space, then I don't see why we would want to have any kind of commercial as part of this bylaw.
Yeah, if you're looking for the most units to be built, yeah, you may want to change the underlying zoning. So commercial isn't allowed there and potentially
Yeah, and that-
developed.
As the planner and economic development director, I want to interrupt the conversation just briefly, if you don't mind, Chaz.
Yep.
So, I mean, I definitely think that the conversation is going in a direction that we probably isn't necessarily the biggest benefit for the town. I'm specifically thinking about the area of the district that's being proposed at the Pheasant Lane Mall parking areas. If you eliminated the existing zoning uses for that district and basically isolated it to multifamily, I mean, that's what you'd get created, but I don't see any negative or drawback. Perhaps aside from some of the concerns that Adriana might want to respond with or brought up about mixed use there. So, I mean, personally, I think the town would benefit from a mixed use development if it could get it in that particular location. And I'd say probably the same thing about the Flint's Corner area. While there might be specific scenarios where there's potential conflicts between residents located either above or in the same building as a restaurant, those are things that could be taken into consideration either within the regulations itself or during the site plan review. But I think overall, from a tax revenue perspective, it would be positive.
Yeah,
So
I don't want to
Would we be able to manage that by actually having a zone within a zone? For instance, if that whole area of the parking lots are zone residential for MBTA communities, would we be able to say 30% of that, of the building space would be able to be mixed and then the 70% not? I mean, would we be able to get down to that level of detail, or should we?
I think that if you did that, that's the thing. I don't think it would be accepted by the state if you required the same way that the mixed use overlay district that the town currently has, that where the town was trying to get the developer to create the commercial development at the same time as the residential. It might not work that way, especially if you said, well, you can't build your residential if you're not building the commercial as far as mixed use is concerned. When you say a zone within a zone, it's possible that we might be able to come up with ways to set density incentives so that it becomes more cost effective or maybe more viable for them to include commercial along the front of the property and then increase their density in the back based on its proximity to Middlesex Road, while still remaining in compliance with the zoning bylaw, because it doesn't guarantee that type of development, but we can do our best to try to encourage it.
Yeah, I don't want it removed from the bylaw, because if a developer wants to come in and this is his business model, I don't want to preclude that from the town. However, it should be under certain restricted circumstances, because when the developer's out of here and the residents are complaining about the commercial that's right next to them, it's going to be the town who has to handle those complaints. So if it can be drafted in a way that we encourage it in certain districts where it makes sense, like the mall, with certain preconditions that, you know, can alleviate some of the concerns that come up on these projects, then go ahead. But I don't want to eliminate it. We should be open to all zoning bylaws that would allow commercial development in the town.
And as far as the multifamily zoning district under 3A, you wouldn't be allowed to mandate any commercial development within the district. All right, let's see. So general development standards. Kind of lost where I was here. Let's see. So the stories we had, all of the districts were modeled to three story maximum. You could do more, but as far as the capacity as it's modeled, three stories was fine to get the 700, the 1:15 ratio and the 50 minimum acre. Let's see.
It might be helpful to briefly point out the sample zoning. When you're talking about the sample zoning has a maximum of 30% for minimum open space. What Mike is talking about is that's the information that he fed into the compliance model when he incorporated the district boundaries that the zoning review committee's been discussing. So he has to put in the criteria. It spits out whether your district area is big enough, or maybe there's some other elements that need to be adjusted. So he played with a lot of those variables to ensure that the proposals would be in compliance. And one of those would be, well, you know, the town has expressed, I don't want to say concern, but at least value for open space on development land. So we looked into the planning board's continuing care campus bylaw, which also stipulated a specific percentage for open space development or maintaining a certain amount of open space on their development. And that's how we arrived at that 30%.
30% open space, and there is also, I think the maximum building coverage was modeled at either 25 or 30% as well. It would be higher if it was a more urban setting, but in this case, it should be fine to have a 30% building coverage within the district with 3 stories. It should have plenty of floor area for the units.
I'm just curious. I'm sorry, I'm a little late to the game here, but I just wanted to understand if you had the opportunity to split it up into 2 different zones, like if you had overlay if it was more applicable to the mall area as opposed to Flint's Corner. If we ever talked about possibility of 4 stories versus 3 stories, and if that opened up more open space by doing that, I'm just curious if you could possibly split it up into 2 different zones and require a different height restriction or story restriction per each one.
Yeah, that's perfectly legal to do in sub-districts and have the same standards throughout, each individual sub-district. Yeah, I know we're working in Chelmsford now, and one of the sites has potential sites has a 5-story that has 5-story hotel on it, and that that sub-district is going to have a 5-story maximum, and where another district that's in a more kind of single family neighborhood is going to have probably like a 2 or 3 story. It was modeled to 2, but potentially a 3-story restriction. And then if you're going up higher, you could have like a 20% lot coverage rather than 30 or plus. Yeah, each sub-district just has to be more than one parcel and have an area of more than 5 acres.
So Mike, if we're looking at 3 stories, what are we looking at for the height of the building?
It's usually about 12 stories or so, 12 feet a story. So
we're looking at 36.
Yeah, 35, 36.
Because I think we really want to try and model this as sort of a residential district, and our bylaws have 36 feet for residential height. So I think we would really want to stay within that.
Yeah, that's that definitely sounds reasonable.
Okay. It looks like we've got 45 to 65, and I think that's too much.
Oh, yep. Yeah, we can scale that down. Yeah, to be consistent. Let's see. Setbacks and frontage they don't play into the compliance model, so that is something that we can talk about a little bit more. Where most of the sites that we're looking at are kind of fairly larger, the parcels, so they may be more apt to having a more of a larger development than like triplexes or townhome, smaller smaller lot sizes. We could probably have, depending on the districts, kind of tailor those standards to the size of the districts and what you're looking for. The off-street parking, this is something that Eric and I have talked about a couple times now. I know you have in your zoning over 2 bedrooms is 2 parking spaces, and if it's a 1 bedroom, I believe it's a singular parking space that's required. We modeled using 1.5 parking spaces per unit as kind of a compromise. He wasn't sure how the review committee would feel about potentially less than 2 spaces for a 2-bedroom or more unit, but we think it should be it's going to be market driven too. A developer is not going to create units that he can't sell because they are underparked. So I think parking demand is going to kind of facilitate a lot of the development.
Well, our current bylaw, I believe, is 1.5 per unit.
No, it's actually 2.
Is it 2?
I believe it's 2 for residential for units that have 2 or more bedrooms. And I do agree with you that 1.5, I know you'd say good. But
I've always argued that we should have more parking because in any household, usually both parents or both adults are working and they need 2 cars. So But I thought our bylaw was 1.5. If it's 2, I'm thrilled. So,
Yeah, we reviewed it earlier today because we were having a conversation about that with multiple communities and for let's see here, where do I have it? For single family, 2-family, and multifamily dwellings, it's 2 spaces per dwelling unit. For units with 2 or more bedrooms and 1 space per dwelling units for others, which would only leave 1-bedroom units. Generally speaking, like design trends, as well as essentially, I know it might be slightly different from a suburban perspective, but you can probably comfortably create parking for multifamily at 1.5 spaces per dwelling without having serious problems. And I thought that would be a pretty good guideline with regards to this district. And I invite the committee itself to weigh in on that, because the alternative, if it goes from 1.5 up to directly all the way up to 2, it's possible that the district boundaries might need to be adjusted because of the information that Mike had put into the compliance model to confirm that, you know, what the zoning review committee was evaluating would be compliant. It could, I think it's a number somewhere between 1.5 and 2 that would probably be most appropriate for this type of development.
okay.
And,
Does
and
anybody else?
it
I'd like
would
to hear
also
from
be
other,
oops, sorry, Eric. It would be subject to site plan review. So if there's a minimum, there could be a recommendation at the planning board level if they think that there should be more, maybe more community parking, a community parking area, that could potentially, they can't require it, but the suggestion would probably facilitate a,
Yeah, it's a lot harder to go in that direction, though, if you're at
Yeah.
1.5 and the planning board is, you know, consistently requesting or is now requiring a higher number for whatever reason. So I think it's best to start at whatever you consider to be acceptable, and then see if if an applicant was asking for less or something like that, the board could take that into consideration during site plan review. But while Mike was making that point, I was just inviting to hear from any of the other zoning review committee members with regards to their perspectives on parking for this type of development.
Well, I think if we could
Yeah,
set, I would be happy with 2. Anybody else on the board, Joe? Jeremy. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
sorry,
Tom.
I think just something I've been seeing in other municipalities is the option of doing, you know, 2 units, 2 parking spaces for a 2-bedroom unit, 1 parking space per 1-bed or studio, and then also having every 10, like let's say it's every 10 units, you require at least 1 guest parking spot, just to try to figure out a good weight of how many parking spots would actually be necessary, because not every 1-bedroom would require 2 parking spots. I would say some do, if you're like husband and wife or a couple that is in a one of those 1-bedrooms, but for the most part, I guess what I'm trying to make sure that we don't do is just create excessive parking where it's underutilized as well. So just my comment. Thanks.
Can we create thresholds too, that if the development exceeds 20 units, it has to have X number of community or shared parking spots? Because the likelihood of having that extra car increases with the size of the development. So if you have, you know, a 15-unit development, you have X number of shared parking spots. I agree keeping it at 1.5, because the whole point is that they should be using the MBTA. That's why we're doing this rewrite. But if we could ensure that the larger complexes where this is going to be a problem, there's enough community parking to accommodate that extra vehicle.
I think those are all good ideas. Oops.
Larry, Joe, you want to chime in, or? Joe?
I would stick with the state guidelines for now, and then if it goes for plan review, it can then be modified at that point.
Okay. Larry,
All
any
right.
thoughts? Larry,
You're muted, Larry.
if you, yeah.
I'm sorry. So, I am unaware of any households or families that don't have a minimum of 2 cars. Even one person, people who I know who live by themselves, the ones I know in Tyngsborough all have a minimum of 2 cars. I would think you'd have to be a 2.
Yep.
But that's me. I mean, if you're gonna tell people,
And I get,
I'm sorry, I mean, if the point is to tell people you must take the MBTA and you can't have a second car, I mean, I guess that's an option. Yeah, I guess no one has to move into that particular spot, you know, if they have cars.
Well, and really, where we're putting these in our town, we really don't have access to public transportation that's gonna get us to the MBTA, so people are still gonna use 2 cars. We're just trying to be in compliance here, and I think we need to be realistic about how we're gonna set this thing up, so I'm with you, Larry, on this. I think 2 cars is a minimum.
and I get where you both are coming from in this. But you know, this type of community is a little bit different than a single family house that we typically think of when we come to Tyngsborough. This type of community is a starter home. It's a little bit different, and I know that we are Tyngsborough, and we need to also think about how we're going to be commuting. But I think 2 per unit is excessive, especially if there's any studios or 1-beds. To require an excessive amount of parking, we could then make this a little bit unfeasible for any developer to come in and do something like that because of, and also I'm also thinking about the density and how we could also create more green space on these sites, because for it to be swallowed up by excessive parking outdoors would be sort of a shame that, you know, you wouldn't encourage more open space on some of these parcels. So I think I agree, like, keep with the state guidelines, but I think it's something that we should definitely get back to make sure that we're analyzing exactly what our community needs for parking in this type of ratio. But
Do we have any analysis on the parking that's at the Trahan development on Middlesex Road that just went up, the 40Bs? Like, how is the parking situation there? The townhouses? Like, do we have
Oh.
a parking issue there?
Sorry, on Middlesex Road. Now I know what you mean, the 40B
Yeah.
specific. I don't off the top of my head recall, because I wasn't part of the permitting process for that, so I'm trying to remember what the parking is available there. Do you
But
remember?
as a town, do we hear any issues?
Nope, nothing's definitely come through here with regards to people parking inappropriately or other issues, but I can check in with the building commissioner if he's.
I mean, that's one of the larger developments that's gone in over the last 5 years. I mean, that's a
Mhm.
real world example of, you know, this is starter homes. It's going to be, you know, a single person or a couple that is going to start here. So we can have a real world example of how they're being used in Tyngsborough.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't want to take up. Well, it's up to you, Mr. Chair. You can decide how long you want to handle this item, but one of the things that we could ask Mike to do as well, there'll be another meeting where he can bring some of these questions and concerns.
Sure. Yeah, if you
to
could look
the-
at just,
to the state.
I mean, I was part of the committee that permitted those buildings on Middlesex, and it was so long ago, I just don't remember. That
Yeah, I
all-
don't remember either.
Yeah, and I think you were part of that as well, Joe. But it's kind of a lot of water under the bridge since then, so.
It is, but it is, it's an
And it's a
example
great
of
point.
real world.
Absolutely, Adriana, yeah. So Eric, if you could
Yeah.
just see what we did permit there, that would be, and how it's working, that'd be great.
Yeah, I made a note. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, there is an MAPC study to it's perfect fit parking study that might be worth taking a look at. We're examining the kind of current parking demands.
That'd be great. Yep. And we could also, I mean, can we ask them to, as they're building these units, maybe put a garage underneath or something like that, that would, allow parking to be there, but not necessarily take up space that could be used for green space. I don't know if that's something we could put into the bylaw, but it might be part of the permitting process.
Yeah, I think that would count if there's parking underneath the structure, it would count as the towards the number. But I'm not sure that you can require the subgrade parking through
Well,
this.
I get-
I'll look into it.
Sure, yeah, because if we're trying to get 15 units in an acre, that's pretty tight to begin with. And you want to have 30% open space. It doesn't leave much room for parking, unfortunately.
Nope.
So. All right, let's move on to whatever we've got next on your list of things to discuss, Mike.
Yeah, so we do have potential parking for bicycles. Might be a little bit difficult given the sites that are selected for safe bike routes, but that's the state did provide language for such uses that could be utilized.
Okay.
Let's see.
Are we requiring a number of those parking spots, the bicycle storage?
I don't believe that's a requirement, but it could be if you as an optional.
I don't know, I think it might help give the developers a basis of how much space would be required. I'm not fully certain how many spaces I would require, but I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, so it looks like there are some recommendations from the state in that language. Try to catch up here. All right. So I think waiver for requirements for historic buildings. I don't believe we have any potential historic buildings within the districts that were proposed at this point. EV parking charging stations. Does the town have standards for EV parking?
We don't. It's something we've talked about at our last meeting to try and get something. I think that's something we really should try and incorporate into this. But I think, to be perfectly honest, once this whole thing comes to fruition and things start to get built, I think the number of EVs on the road, based on what I was reading today, said that 85% of all charging will be done at home. So we need to have we're going to definitely have to have some EV stations in these units going forward, especially if they're looking at EV sales to be 2030 at 32%, 2035 at 45%. The US goal for EV sales by 2030 is 50%, and they got to be charged somewhere. So I think we really we'll take a look at this when we get a little more information on it, but I think this is important that we incorporate this into our plan.
Yeah, I mean, passive house requirements already starting to require the EV charging stations as well, at least if they're stubbed. Just trying to figure out where the balance is, because if we, how much do we actually get into the nuances of the language, or do we refer back to the code that is going to be implemented for some of these multifamily buildings? Because a lot of the energy code requirements already that have just been released are starting to require some of this already. So I didn't want to get out in front of it and make a suggestion and then it be trumped by basically something else that's already occurring.
Good point.
I mean, the charging station would be inside the home itself. So are we talking about the sites that are not going to have like access to a charger to have separate EV parking spots?
I don't think this language is specific to where those charging stations are. They could be within the structure, or they could be outside of the structure.
So these aren't the common or shared EV charging stations, like if the units are built such that like it's a garden style, you wouldn't be able to charge your vehicle. So do we require, like, the common area shall have X number of EV charging stations?
Yeah.
Or is that part of the electrical code changes?
Well, it doesn't say how you lay it out. It just says for every 20 parking spaces. So you may have a EV charging bank where you have, 15 spots and all have chargers, and they're all right next to each other for serviceability. And so people have to use those spots to charge.
Okay, so it really comes down to the type of development, because if you want to charge on your own electrical meter, so preferably you want to charge in your own townhouse or condo.
It doesn't really translate to apartment living. But a lot of these charging stations, you have to pay per kilowatt anyway, right? So you'd have to. Yeah.
Understood, but like the townhouse style, you could charge on your own. You could install the equipment on your own panel and your own meter to charge, but it's the other, more dense.
We don't know what
style.
kind of style they're talking about here. That's the thing.
Well, I think that's the kind of clarification, that if you have the inability to charge in your own townhouse or condominium, do we then require, per the zoning, to have a shared number or percentage of shared EV charging stations?
Andrea, I think in my opinion, it comes down to just like the quantity of how many parking spaces would be required on site, and then you just do a math problem to say like there's a certain, like Joe was saying, is 1 per 20 spots that you have to require EV charging station, and that would be either in the townhouse style, the tuck under, or the garden style where it would be out on site, or even underneath the building if the fire department deemed it okay to put it underneath the building, and that type of
But do
style.
we want to burden the townhomes with that requirement if they can charge on their own?
I think so, in my opinion, just because it's a pretty easy hookup, especially if you're doing a new build. It's not a heavy lift. I think it's a heavier lift if it is an outdoor parking spot that is a full charging station. But we could also talk about if it's just stubbed to the area and then not actually built. So you have the infrastructure already there. And then if it becomes more viable down 5-10 years from now, where everybody's doing charging stations because more EV vehicles, then they start actually installing them.
Yeah, I'm thinking about taking away from that shared or common parking space if you have the EV charging stations and they're not being used. And I agree, we're going to get to the point where they are going to be used all the time. But until we get to that point, these developers have to come in and build in the interim.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but even now in townhouses and in buildings like that, they have to have them wired so that every townhouse can be, can have a charger built into it. I would think the parking spaces, we would want to do that as well, maybe not all of them, but I mean, if people are going to be using outside parking, I'm on board with Jeremy to say, okay, let's at least require that the parking spots have the EV chargers there, or the infrastructure there to put them in down the road if need be. The last thing we want is neighbors fighting over 2 charging stations and having that conflict going on. And so at any rate, we can discuss that further, and maybe we can get some guidelines from the state as to if 1 in 20 is what they're requiring, then we should at least have that be the minimum. But I think that we would want to have more. So
yeah.
I just want to, excuse me, point out, Chaz, that Kelly from NIMCOG has her hand raised as well.
oh, hi Kelly, I didn't even know you were here. Welcome.
Hi, I've been listening in the background and now I'm here.
Okay.
I did just want to point out as one alternative to this. I mean, obviously, if you have a minimum, developers, especially given the trends regarding EV vehicles, EV vehicle, so that's redundant. EV is that developers will probably provide more. The other thing is that you could consider maybe in lieu of having a required minimum of EV charging spaces, you could have a requirement that parking spaces be EV ready. So basically you're setting them up so that if somebody does actually eventually want to put those in, it's easier for them to do that without actually sort of dictating where those EV parking spaces go. So that's just one alternative that we've seen used in other communities.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Well, just to step back one, get back in more to the big picture. Do we see these units being condos or apartments or both? Because I think that really is going to play into what we would do with the EV charging going down the road. You know,
I think that's a tough thing to find.
Yeah,
If it's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about types of ownership where the law is really just talking, it's multifamily. Granted, it does change the site layout when you're going condominium association or one entity that owns the property, but we really can't really plan for the type of ownership.
so, okay, so that really answers my question, that there is no restrictions to the type of ownership for these units then that are in the MBTA. Okay. All right.
And general development standards, we probably want to have a conversation about the threshold as to what number of units are they required, or square footage are they is the developer required to adhere to the development standards and site plan review. I know it's listed here as 25 units or 25,000 square feet, but we probably want to get it down somewhere. I would think around like five units would be required or more to go through development standards and site plan review.
Well, I would think that based on the areas that we have designated, certainly everything is going to be more than 25 units, isn't it? If we're doing 15 per acre.
Yeah, there is a potential that if there was a subdivision that could come in, yeah, if there's a minimum lot size that is 40,000 square feet, it's you're gonna have more than 5 units, but many more than 5 units, but yeah, I'm open to whatever your suggestions are.
To better summarize, or not better, but to try to explain what Mike was answering there. If one of the owners of the larger parcels where this district is located sells off an acre or 2 acre piece of land at 15 units per acre, or if they sell off half an acre, somebody tries to develop 7 units or 8 units. That's the type of scenario I guess he's trying to ensure that people don't sell off pieces of the land to subvert the requirements for the development standards.
Absolutely. We need to
Yeah.
protect ourselves then. Yep, I understand.
And the same thing, I mean, we just want to make sure we have the inclusionary zoning set at 7 units per acre or 7 units, and then inclusionary is required, right? So does that impact, just thinking about it, does that impact where we want to set it at?
Do you mean where we would make an alteration to the inclusionary zoning requirements, or where we would set this general development standard number?
This development standard number, just thinking about, we have that inclusionary set at 7. So you mentioned that scenario where somebody breaks it off and is doing a smaller 5 or 6 units, so 6 units, so they don't they fall underneath that requirement for doing inclusionary zoning. Like, what happens if somebody comes in and does splits it off 10 different times and they're doing it in that fashion? Then nobody is requiring inclusionary zoning. I guess I wouldn't want that scenario to happen.
That's a good point.
And we really haven't, and I don't want to jump around too much here, but we haven't talked about SHI and maintaining that. That was sort of back under the definitions where I saw that are these all subject to affordable units based on our town bylaws now, or can they be affordable, or just how does that work, Mike?
Yeah, you can also have inclusionary zoning in this within this district. However, it would be limited to 10% of the units unless you were to do a housing study to prove that there's a market for subsidized units, and then you could go. The state could approve up to 20%, but you'd have to file. It's an EFH.
Well, it can be done though.
It can be done, yeah.
Okay, and the state is saying at least 10%.
Yeah, and that 10%, then you maintain your SHI for the most part. So,
Which is what we're
Like you're-
concerned with, obviously. I mean, I don't want.
that would allow you to
Stop these
maintain your
things.
proportion.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's no
10% doesn't
requirement.
require any extra effort, and beyond 10% requires special justification.
okay, because I think now I think we're at 15% over, what is it? 20 units or something, Eric? I don't recall, but
Multifamily would be 12.
12, okay. And then we're putting 15 per acre, so automatically we would be falling into that 12% based on our current bylaw, but I guess we're viewing this thing as a completely separate bylaw, a completely separate zoning, which does not affect any of our other bylaws. Is that correct, Mike?
It's an overlay, so it can supersede if there are areas that to regulate. Most of the standards are going to be specific in here, and you'd have to have you would have to call out the inclusionary requirement of 10%, and that it supersedes the any non 3A overlay district requirement.
But we can put the 10% in and be safe with the state and not
Yep.
have to, but anything over that, we would have to apply separately for?
Correct.
Okay, all right, well, let's make sure we get the 10% in then. And that rounds up to, in case it's, 13 units, it would go to, or whatever, okay. Great. All right, sorry to break in on that, but I was concerned about that, so.
Yeah. So let's see, site design. These are all areas that you have control over and can add whatever standards related to these particular categories that you'd like to see. Screening for parking materials, location, what you'd like to see in your open space, vehicular access, how the vehicular circulation goes through the site. Again, landscaping, lighting, where mechanicals are located, if there is screening requirements, dumpster requirements, and then the section on stormwater management, basically referring to state law and the state stormwater handbook. Buildings, let's see, multiple on a lot. It gives you jurisdiction over the design of the lot, how pedestrians move through the site. And Kelly, feel free to jump in if you have any comments on this section.
Yeah, no, I think just to note that this section is entirely optional. So any pieces of this would be like kind of take it or leave it. I think the above section is really about if you're going to do site plan review, these are things that are ways that you may want to consider regulating.
I'm just curious, is there anything in here about loading requirements for move in, move out vehicles, or even Amazon type deliveries. Just because they tend to take up some space right in front of the units if need be.
Yeah, I know, like, just in most like apartment building situations, if you don't have like if you don't have an off-street parking lot, a lot of those moving trucks will, you just get a parking permit for a day on the street, and that's pretty much how they do it. So I think that you may want to consider whether that's something you really want to regulate in the zoning bylaw versus looking at your overall town bylaws as far as your select board's jurisdiction over parking permits and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I'm more thinking if it's a development within the community, just looking out for their design. And if you have multiple buildings inside this community, let's say there's 4 different multifamily buildings in there, that they're accommodating for it right in front of their building or near an elevator or something like that, because that tends to be a little bit of a headache when people are moving in, if they have a tractor trailer truck or a box truck or something like that, and where they're
Sure.
going to be parking that.
Yeah, we can definitely discuss that a little bit more in depth when we start kind of talking about design and massing of buildings. One idea that we had talked with Eric about earlier was having individual ground floor entrances or paired off entrances, so it's creates more of like a townhouse feel rather than a large apartment building with large corridors. So that it may not have the same requirements or demands like you're talking about, where move-in vans are coming and going, and especially as it gets closer to the first of the month, where typical leases are expiring and people are moving in and out. I don't think you'll see quite as much concentrated moving.
And I know if we had our druthers, I think we're looking at some townhouses within these developments, but if it is accommodating both different styles, if it is a garden style or a townhouse, I think just looking at what those differences actually entail, because a typical multifamily, if there's a package or a mail room, how that is accessed from a FedEx truck or UPS truck and USPS. I think that's just figuring out how they're getting inside the units, or if there's a common clubhouse that they're going to be parking at, just making sure they're accommodating for that extra space outside of the normal parking restrictions that we're already implementing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think the question for this board is also whether or not you would want that in site plan review, or if you'd want that delineated in the zoning itself. So this could be something that is part of site plan review and maybe a little bit more flexible. Or you may want to specify it directly in the zoning.
Good point.
Are most municipalities doing site plan review through the planning board? Or are they treating this like through the ZBA the way a 40B would be?
All communities that we're working with, it would go through the planning board.
Okay. Because it seemed to be kind of, I wasn't really sure how that was going to happen in reading through the opening part of this. So, okay, good.
So, Mr. Chair, you could go back to some of the 40Bs that we were discussing as to what the ZBA was putting in for amendments to the plans. For instance, it was brought up a common postal area for pickup. We also did off-street pickup and drop off for students on school buses, so they could get off the main thoroughfare and actually pull into the development and have a turnaround for the bus. We also did special provisions for sidewalks, ADA compliant, and we also did on-site snow storage amendments to those plans, which always worked out per recommendation. But that would be part of the site plan review that would come before planning.
Yep. And do we also envision conservation having to be involved in this as well? Mike, or is it a one-stop? Everything goes to planning board? Everything's frozen up here.
Oh, I think sorry, he froze.
Yeah, I
was-
froze, so
yeah, go
I
ahead.
didn't get the last like minute.
So
So
I'm just
so
curious.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kelly.
So it would only go to conservation if it was within your wetland review area. Mike, can you confirm or modify that?
I didn't hear the
The question was whether this would also go, any proposals would also go through Conservation Commission review.
yeah, it would still be subject to the same environmental reviews. Uh, So again, it's more kind of more optional site plan review, buildings and shared outdoor spaces, corner lot requirements, infill lots, although we might not see many of those and given the districts that are being
Is
considered.
everyone freezing or is it just me?
I didn't catch any glitches on my end, other than
Yeah.
Mike freezing, and I thought you might have frozen briefly there. Travis.
Yeah, I keep freezing up, Eric. I don't know. It looks like everybody else is frozen. Is it just me or is it everyone?
I got a little glitchy, but it seems to be doing good right now.
Right.
Yeah,
Not
you're on the
encountered
slow end.
anything.
Chaz, you're on the slow internet side of town.
As long as it's just the slow internet, not the slow side of town.
I'm okay here.
Okay. We seem to be all back again, I guess.
Okay, then we get into the affordability requirements, which we discussed earlier. Be in lieu of, we would have to, I spoke with Eric earlier on that, and potentially there'd be a Tyngsborough would have to adjust the requirement for what the payment is to be involved in this. But Eric, how much was the per unit is required now?
So the more I review fee and lieu's and Tyngsborough's specifically, Tyngsborough's calculations right now need a lot of revision. I think it provides too affordable an option for a developer to potentially pursue other alternatives besides constructing the units. My recommendation for if you're going to require affordable units to be incorporated into these developments, to consider completely eliminating a fee and lieu option. I don't think there's anything that prevents you from eliminating that. I know it provides alternatives and some flexibility to the developers, but considering this is already a by right development, I don't think you need to have special accommodations, if you will, to handle that scenario.
Yeah, it would makes a lot of sense rather than having money put into the affordable housing trust that really isn't going to do
Sure.
the same.
I mean, I'm staff that advises the Affordable Housing Trust, and it's not gonna prevent them from having things to do. They just focus on different types of projects than spending money that came from other developments. And I think that, excuse me, given the nature and the potential size and density of the developments we're talking about here, I don't think it's a big reach to require the 10 to 12% affordability into the development itself, and it keeps those units integrated into the development.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I really don't like the payment in lieu. I don't know how anybody else feels, but it just seems to give the developer an out, and they shouldn't have one, in my opinion. So.
The next section deals with development standards for the affordable units, basically that it it has to be integrated into the site and compatible and not kind of off into the corner of the site and have less amenities than the other units in the development. The next section, you have a site plan review section, correct, in the zoning bylaw?
Once we have everything revised and republished, yes, we will.
Okay, yep. So we just make sure we integrated some of this language into to your ordinance bylaw.
Okay.
I didn't see anything about floor plans as a requirement in here. Can we add that to it? I may have missed it, but
As a requirements for the site plan application?
yes.
Okay.
We get stormwater utilities, landscape, but I did not see anything about floor plans, which would tell us how many bedrooms and what the configuration would be.
Yeah.
If I was going to expand briefly, Chaz, on that question, it could potentially get confusing to a developer to provide, like when you say if you're requiring floor plans, they might not be fully developed by the time they're submitting their application. Although they might know specifically what their mix is for bedrooms, so they might be able to have a general footprint of a building and that here's a sample floor plan that has this building's going to have 3-bedroom units on the first floor and 2-bedroom units on the second floor, etc. But maybe Jeremy can weigh in a little bit more since he's worked on some of the architectural plans and the projects that get proposed, and how much of a hurdle is it to require floor plan reviews during the application process for site plan review?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's typically that you don't require floor plans, but if it's going to a Pell application, they're going to have to do it anyway, and going through the state. You're requiring them to basically do a schematic design submittal, but it is on the developer to really prove on their end that it's going to be viable within that unit ratio and that makeup that they're doing to make sure everything fits. So it does seem, in my opinion, a little bit of a heavy lift to require full out floor plans, because that usually starts to get into a lot of mechanical engineering, electrical, where they're usually not involved at this stage where you're going through site permitting. It ends up not being a viable way of a developer getting through to the next level.
But wouldn't
You'd
we
be able
want
to
to know
get,
how many bedrooms and how that's going to
Sure,
work?
yeah.
Parking and that sort of
I
thing?
agree. Yeah, you need to know unit makeup. You need to know how many 2-bedrooms, how many 1-beds, how many studios. And they're going to know the typical size as far as what happens within those units, and understanding how they're going to we're going to need to know the sewer requirements and how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms. That's something that sewer is going to want to know. But to understand how the units are actually laid out, I don't know what it really does from a planning board perspective and a review process to require that, because it does tend to end up being a heavy lift to start designing each one of those units.
would plan views or renderings, exterior renderings be applicable at this point?
But we do have, landscaping and screening and that sort of thing.
So we know what
required.
the building is gonna look like, and how many
You could-
stories? I mean, just like an exterior, would that make
Yeah,
sense?
you can ask for elevations as part of
Elevation plan.
this. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if we're reviewing this, I want as much information as I can get, quite frankly. So,
Oh yeah, I just wanted to be careful because a simple inclusion of the word, like saying floor plans, all of a sudden creates, a requirement where if it's an unpopular proposal and the builder or the developer saying it's a heavy lift, do we really need to provide floor plans, and the board or anybody else can say, it says right there, you gotta provide floor plans, and now they gotta spend, $400,000 on, floor plan developments for, whatever, however many units they're creating. When it might have been sufficient to provide the planning board with a bedroom mix, because that's really the crux of what you're trying to get at.
And I didn't want to get hung up in this too much, but I do think we need an overall idea of how the building is laid out, and not necessarily how each unit is laid out, because
Right.
we want to understand how utilities are coming into the building, so we can provide feedback on and understand it within our department heads, because they're going to want to know, how is that electric, where's the transformer placed, where's the fire department access. But as far as the way that the units themselves are laid out, I don't think it helps us that much. So I don't know how you word that, I guess. I don't know, because I agree that we need some kind of floor plan, but it doesn't need to be at the construction document level.
What I have seen as far as site plan review is sometimes you just have some of those walls that delineate unit from unit, but you might not have some of the interior details of it. So that you can just understand how circulation and stairs, elevator, et cetera, works. But you're not getting so tied up into like, how's the kitchen laid out, that sort of thing. And I think later in this section, it does provide a list of what would be included in that. I don't know if there is a specific site plan review application that the town requires as part of site plan review, but that would be another location where you would list out the number of bedrooms and parking spaces and all of that sort of thing.
Does it say anything about maybe square footage allocation per unit or something like that, or per space, rather than getting into the nuances of the actual layouts? I didn't know if that's a possible way of wording it.
The one thing I would want to be careful of is that the section 3A requires that we can't regulate on size of the units. And so I would just want to make sure that that doesn't become a factor that plays into site plan review.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's more, I guess from a review perspective, trying to understand how the unit makeup is made, it works, and that we understand how what kind of amenities they're providing and things like that, so we can start to figure it out.
Yeah, I think as far as what you really want to know is how the site plan works. Like, how does the circulation go? Do you have proper access for safety and fire, all that sort of thing? A developer isn't going to build something that isn't going to sell or rent out. So I think you just don't want to get too much into unit design when you start digging into details.
But we would like to see what the units are going to look like from the outside. Is that in here, Kelly?
Yeah,
I believe that elevations are included here as part of site plan review.
So
And that is, that's a pretty standard, it's a pretty standard requirement.
So we would see the steps getting into the buildings and what the exterior is going to look like. And
Yep.
All right.
Does it talk about materials at all?
I don't know if you can scroll down. That is something that, as far as design review, you could start to look at. If you have design review, if you don't currently have design review, that's something you could add at some point. And that's perfectly acceptable, so long as the development is allowed by right. So you're allowed to do that. It's just that part of what we're doing with this project.
Eric, we don't have a design review within Tyngsborough, but is there a way of putting it in here so that we just have a general understanding of the aesthetics of the exterior of the building? Because we could get an elevation, but that might not necessarily tell us what we're looking at from an aesthetic point of view.
I'm not sure what the elevation might be missing when you say you're looking for something else aesthetically.
Just a call out of materials, like if there's brick or metal panel or clapboard siding or asphalt shingles, that kind of thing. So we just have a general sense of how it fits in with the character of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think it's something that could be incorporated into the requirements for the package for site plan review.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Could you scroll down a little bit? I think there might be some details in here. Oh, no, there's not. Sorry.
Not that
I think
section.
they're specified earlier in the
Yeah.
earlier section.
Mhm.
I think even a little bit. No, that's for affordable housing. That's something I would say we could definitely look and make sure that that's included.
Yeah.
But as far you can sort of request to like, and again, site plan review can't be used to deny the project. But it is an opportunity to work with the developer on a proposal just to say, hey, this is going to make it more compatible with the surrounding context. So you could require that they provide details such as like materials and elevations.
Draft site plan requirements lists with NIMCOG to ensure that everything is incorporated there, because a site plan review set of requirements doesn't even have to be in your bylaws. So it's simply part of your application package. And I think that's probably the best place to put it.
Kelly and Mike, can we require things like solar panels and heat pumps and that sort of thing in these buildings?
I think we actually have an optional section in here on solar, renewable energy installation. Yep,
Do you have do you have standards for such requirements in other throughout town for multifamily buildings? Because
Not
I
yet.
don't. Yeah, I don't. I think you can require it as long as it's required for other it's not specifically targeting this type of development, is having that the only requirement.
So in our master plan, we're asked to encourage renewable energy and so forth. And every time we ask, they go, oh yeah, well, we'll look at it. And the answer is, it just doesn't happen. So, I mean, I would be very happy to try and put together some kind of package that would be required as part of our bylaws. But I was hoping that maybe this might be a spot to where we could start that conversation by putting it into these types of developments. Is that not allowed, or does it have to be on the other side first and then it applies to this?
It can, you could do it at the same time. You could draft the language, say for buildings over that with a square footage of over, for a footprint of over 20,000 square feet, you require X amount of solar panel coverage on that roof, or readiness, solar panel readiness.
Well, that's required by the state now anyway.
Yeah, the main thing is that you can't place additional burden on multifamily allowed by right beyond what you already place on multifamily in your zoning.
Are you guys seeing any of this in other communities that you're dealing with now? People trying, or towns trying to push development and requiring in their bylaws for renewable energy?
I mean, I've definitely seen this. I know Watertown and Arlington and Cambridge all have energy requirements that are part of their zoning. A lot of them are energy requirements that are required for single family, multifamily, 2-3 family townhomes, et cetera, because that's just an overall value of the community. But I would say I don't see them necessarily applying it only to MBTA communities zoning.
Is that something that you could send to Eric so that we could look at it as a committee to see if that's a direction we want to go in? Probably not this year, but sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I could point to some sections of certain bylaws that I'm aware of as far as like future zoning for the town. Sure.
That'd be terrific. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, so we're kind of at the end of this document then, I guess. We kind of skipped over the whole beginning, but I guess that's sort of all right, and it's just mostly definitions and whatnot. Was there anything in particular that we probably should look at the beginning in depth, Mike, or what are your thoughts?
I think one thing we'll want to make sure that the definitions don't conflict in any way with any other section. I don't.
The thing that kind of came to my eye was in as the purpose, in purpose, which was section A, part 2. Do we want to take out the last few words that say within a half a mile of a transit station, since we don't have any transit stations, or do we want to just take out that whole section, or what? I know there was some comments about that, so.
I think the purposes
That's the
here are
purpose.
are suggestions for your consideration. You don't have to include all of them. Recommend including at least one. So this is basically just from the state model code. And
Okay.
again, like the proximity to stations is not applicable to Tyngsborough. So I think it's a matter of, do you want to select one or more of these as part of why this is included in your zoning bylaw?
Okay. All right. Thank you. Was there anything else in here, Mike, that you wanted to go over, or Kelly, did you wanted to go over with us, that we just kind of skipped through this thing really quickly at the beginning?
Yeah, this is kind of just the sample language. We really didn't modify it too much to be specific to Tyngsborough at this point. We kind of wanted to get some feedback on it before we started making any edits or advising on how to adjust the bylaw to be more specific. But this gives you kind of the framework of the sample zoning from the state and kind of where we can go, you know, using as a guide to shape how we craft the bylaw.
So do you think that what we've discussed tonight gives you sort of an idea of how we want to go with this? And I guess we'll throw it back to you to sort of revise this to reflect our conversations this evening.
Yeah, that, and I think you know, as we get feedback too on the districts, we can tailor the zoning to the individual districts or sub districts and make it align.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Eric.
so I guess one other thing that I was hoping that the zoning review committee could share with Kelly and Mike, and myself, is perhaps a relatively brief discussion with regards to I guess structure preferences. So I think it probably helps to identify whether the town thinks it's more appropriate to have more units per building, less units per building. What do you think is an appropriate number? Because while that sounds like a very specific request, considering all the other characteristics of development, it has one of the biggest impacts with regards to the way a site plan would get developed. So when I've been looking at these, I guess, potential plans or what could potentially get developed in communities like Tyngsborough's, this is an opportunity to help create what has been previously identified as like buildings that are more characteristic for Tyngsborough. And I've been anticipating some discussions about saying, you know, could we limit the number of units per building to 4? Could we limit it to 6? Do we want to require some sort of, you know, more variety for a development? In other words, you should have a mix of buildings. If you have a building with 4, you have to have at least another building with 2. I don't know. I'm just trying to like get something out there with regards to encouraging proposals that meet the visual and structural preferences of the community, or maybe even specifically the boards that have been elected to do the site plan reviews.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I guess we'll open it up to the board and see what their preferences are. Who wants to go first? Adriana?
Sure. So I don't know if it's a matter of preference about what the town character is after all the development that's happened over the last 5 to 10 years. We're really not a garden style community. Most of what gets developed here seems to be the townhouse, separate entrance type of development. So I think a garden style community in the locations that have been identified would be tough to kind of fit into the character. But I don't know if we have the authority to limit, that every unit shall have its own entrance so that we can shy away from that. I have nothing against garden styles. It's just not the character of the town with all of the development, including the 55 plus that we have in town.
Thank you. Larry, how about you?
Well, the previous point is certainly a good one, which I agree with, townhouses. And then I guess without having had an opportunity to do the math, I would figure, so what is the minimum number that you would need per building to satisfy the requirements of the state as far as density goes, but not go over it. So I guess I'd be of the mindset to try, and when it comes to units per structure, kind of figure out how many, like I liked your the idea of keeping the residential limit of 36 feet high. So that's going to limit you to 3 stories. And then I guess I'd be in favor of just doing the math and figuring out, okay, what's the, how small can these units be and still satisfy the requirements as far as units per acre. And that's the direction I would be thinking in.
Okay, thank you. Jeremy?
Thanks, Jess. I guess kind of reverse back to how I started off talking about the different zones. I think there's a appropriateness to each one that has been already laid out, and the townhouse style I think caters well to the other areas other than right near the border, near the mall. And if I just want to be cautious that we're townhouses sound great on the surface, but there can also be a lot of monotony with them being garages right at the front entrance and just basically duplicating that right across for 30 units straight across, and it can get very monotonous, and that architectural style is something I would not prefer for a development. So if there is some appropriateness of doing garden style 3-story buildings in the closer to the mall area, I would be in favor of that, just because I think you can still come up with a variety of architectural style. And if that is talking about, again, starting to implement some design regulations on a project and site review, maybe it's done there. But I just want to be cautious that it sounds great for townhouses and a lot of the images that we've seen for the variety, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be what a developer proposes to us.
Good point. Joe?
I don't know if you can limit the styles according to this district, MBTA district. So I don't know. It's going to really come down to play as to how many units can be fit to meet the requirements per acre, and dictating as to what style you want to have. I think that's contrary to what they're trying to do here. And I think you may have a problem with the state with that. So I would say at this point, not have any kind of requirement built into this, leave it open-ended, but then accordingly, it has to go through site plan review. It's going to be by right. They have to hit those numbers. That's the number one goal. They're going to try to do it as cost effectively as possible. Okay. That's my thought.
Thank you. I kind of agree with you, Joe, that I don't think we are in a position where we should be trying to say, okay, it has to be garden, it has to be whatever. I think that the developers will dictate that. And I guess one of my questions would be, we've identified 3 sites that we think are appropriate in town for this. Would it be, could we require that a developer come in and say, okay, this site's 25 acres, you have to build out the entire site? Or is it the kind of thing where a developer could come in and say, well, I'll take 5 acres of it, but I don't want to do the whole thing? Is that something that we can require, that they would have to do everything or not?
Oh, that would just be so you're only zoning the property, what the developer does, if they decide to build to capacity to the 1 to 15, or they do 1 to 10, it's their choice. You know, obviously they're more than likely going to want to try to get more units, but they're also going to want to sell a marketable product. So you can require that the minimum, you know, if it's you know, in each sub-district's more than 1 parcel, so you could pick the smaller of the parcel and use that as the minimum lot size. So the development would be shaped kind of by that minimum lot size, if that makes sense.
So I guess my question is, if we've got let's say it's a 10 acre, would one developer come in and say, all right, I'm going to do 150 in this 10 acres? Or could they come in and say, well, I know it's 10 acres, but we're only doing 100 here?
They could do that. Yep, you as a town are only required to allow zoning that builds up to the capacity by right, that you're not measured on actual production, and a developer is not required to produce as many units as could be allowed under that zoning.
Okay, that clarifies a lot of questions that I had, a few questions that I had. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
So ultimately, we just have to say, okay, here's the acreage. We're supposed to have 750 units, but we may end up only producing 500 units, and that's okay. Wow.
I think it just in practice and from modeling with the GIS, I highly doubt that you'll be able to construct what we're zoning for with the area, and then you know, any kind of potential like wetlands. It's going to impact the design. You know, so I'd be very surprised if you got close to the build out on what the capacity that it's zoned at.
Okay, good. That's good to know.
And it will happen over time. I mean, it's not all going to happen immediately. So
Oh, yeah.
there are certain sites that you probably are very unlikely to see development on, and then there are others that are going to be a longer term or a midterm development, and some that may be more near term.
Okay, good. Any other questions from the board, or Eric? Anything else that you would like to chime in on before we move on to our next couple items? I'm hoping to get this done by 8, so.
No, I appreciate the feedback that everybody's provided tonight. Thank you.
All right, so at this point, Mike, you and Kelly think that you can sort of narrow this document from 14 pages down to 2? No,
Hopefully not go up to 28.
right, it won't double in size. Good.
You've provided very helpful feedback.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Okay, so are we planning on seeing you at our potential next meeting then or will you just do something and revise these and send them over to Eric for distribution to us, or what's the next step then?
I think we can work with Eric, and then we'll kind of follow whatever he recommends.
Okay, terrific. All right. Well, I want to thank you both for all the work you put in so far, and we look forward to seeing what you come up with next. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah,
Take care.
thanks. All right, moving on to the agenda here. Next, we have multifamily and open space residential development bylaws. Eric, I'll send this over to you.
Sure. So during the last zoning review committee meeting, there was a request to pass along to Judy and Bob looking for improvements to the multifamily and open space development bylaws. Unfortunately, the material that I received back was essentially limited to recommendations to just remove the single lines in each one of those bylaw sections that requires multifamily proposals or either one of those proposals to go to town meeting. I mean, I think we all were aware that that was something that was recommended. So I didn't specifically require or request their attendance tonight, since I knew most of the conversation is going to be about MBTA communities. With that said, I guess I just want to reconfirm with you guys that we would like them to evaluate those sections of the bylaw a little bit more carefully for potential improvements or suggestions within each section, sort of like the way NIMCOG did with the state's model bylaw for MBTA communities. Could Judy and Bob do that for our existing language in our zoning bylaw? You know, this is good, this is bad, might want to change that. That type of thing. That's what I was expecting.
Yeah, I absolutely want him to do that. Just taking out that one line really does not, that's not a review as far as I'm concerned, so.
I mean, the good news is we might, because they didn't provide or spend a lot of time on it yet, hopefully when they do, they will be able to do so with the benefit of having potential commentary or additional feedback from the Attorney General's office by then. Hopefully, the Attorney General's office does not request another extension of time for review, because I'm expecting to hear back from them by next week.
Oh, good. That was gonna be my next question, is where did that all sit still, so. All right, any questions from the board or comments from the board, anyone? All right, I don't see anything. Do we have a date when we want to try and get together again, Eric? I know you had thrown out some thoughts towards October and November.
Yeah, I got caught up with a lot of other things today and didn't have time to check in with Judy to check on her availability for November. Somebody had gotten to me about the 7th. I can't remember who said they were or weren't available that day, but that was one of the suggestions that I was aiming for, because I think as a group we're trying to go for Tuesdays. How does the 7th look for the people who are attending tonight?
I bet that is election day. Does that sound right?
Yeah, is that November
is.
7th? That's
Yes.
election day. Yeah, I think that's gonna be tough.
Okay.
Well, do we have one for October? Let's.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, well, good question. Yep, I had time with that phone. Send out. I mean, I've been trying for like the second Tuesday. Yes, the Conservation Committee meets that day, but so far media hasn't had too much difficulty covering it, which has been good. How does October 10th look?
That's okay with me. I know you don't want to back up the same week that we have planning board. Is that why you're thinking more of the second?
Yeah, that's part of it. Let's see here. Just checking to see if I have specific times or dates. Yeah, Judy said she was. Let's see. Judy is available on October 10th and has meetings on just about all the other Tuesdays of that month. And then she was going to get back to me on her November dates. And I know that Bob is available on the 7th, and that's the day that you mentioned is election day. Okay, so the 10th, at least it looks like we could confirm Judy if she's kept that date. She responded to me on that 5 days ago, so hopefully she still has it open.
Generally speaking, the Finance Committee is meeting on the first Tuesday of the month,
Okay,
which would be problematic.
yep, and we'll stay away from that one. Jeremy, I know Tuesdays are sometimes a problem for you. Does the 10th work for you?
Works, I'm good.
All right, well, why don't we plan on the 10th then?
Okay.
And we'll see if Judy can be here. That's great. Do we want to try and bring NEMCOG back in on the 10th? Do you think they would be ready with some more modifications to the?
I've been trying to request at least one person's attendance at those, like once a month. It's not, I mean, I know they have a lot of public meetings that they attend. We're kind of in a very intense portion of our development here, so I would probably request that one of them attend. But if they say they're not available, or if I've spent a considerable amount of time reviewing language with them ahead of time, and I feel extremely comfortable going over every nuance, I could probably handle that type of conversation or that type of input on my own.
All right, so let's look at this even a little more in depth. Is the second Tuesday of the month, is that good for everyone in general? Are there any conflicts that we don't have or do we have that we would want to stay away from that, or?
It's not bad for me, and I know that media will have an easier time covering it if they can anticipate farther out what days the committee's meeting.
Yeah, and I'm thinking NEMCOG too, and Bob and Judy, if they know that, okay, that it's always the second Tuesday, then maybe they can plan around that a little bit easier.
Good
Okay.
here.
Yep, works for me.
Okay. All right, so let's just sort of tentatively plan on that going forward then, so we'll plan to rendezvous again on the just look at my calendar here. On October the 10th and move forward from there.
Thank you.
All right, I think we've covered all we need to. How about a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Larry. Could I have a
Second.
second? All right, all in favor, say
Sure.
aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good night, everybody. And Eric, I'll stay
night.
on.